I get an email from Kevin. Madonna's getting ready to go on tour. We're wondering if you could come in and help her out and get ready. And I wrote back, I don't know if you wrote this to the right person, but I don't know what I could tell Madonna to get ready for a tour. She seems like she's been doing this a while.
Hello, and welcome to episode 24 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of August 5th, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including generosity toward that band world from the NFL, a wind ensemble full of band directors bids farewell to its conductor, a story that involves dropping names, and this time it's me doing the name dropping. And I conclude my cliffhanger conversation from 2 weeks ago with percussionist DAMON GRANT. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. Some of you noted that a couple of segments of last week's episode featured my voice, but a little bit hoarser, leaning a bit toward stentorian. You're not wrong. I recorded the second strain and trio after returning from the Drum Major Academy experience, wherein I used my voice more in 3.5 days of teaching than I usually do in a fortnight. Throat lozenges will only get you so far, and I didn't have any with me. Come to think of it, you can get DMA people of the rather distant past to smile and remember stories from then just by saying throat lozenges. That's a tale for another time, I think. But later in the episode, I have a tale from that other time for you. Man, this is getting all time travel-y again. And this week, I'm going to finish what I started 2 weeks ago. Talk about time travel. So, move your books off the timpani head, and let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline's Savannah, Georgia. Credit to the writing and reporting of Josephine Johnson of the Savannah Morning News. After nearly 2 years without permanent leadership, the Savannah Wind Symphony has appointed retired Professor Emeritus and trumpeter John Madden as artistic director. In autumn 2022, the Wind Symphony's previous director of 25 years, Mark Johnson, died of cancer. The band auditioned 3 of its own members for the vacant position during the 2023-2024 season. Madden taught for 28 years at Michigan State University before retiring in 2017. In 2014, he received the Dorothy J. and John D. Withrow Award for Excellence in Teaching. He was inducted into the American Bandmasters Association in 2008. Wind Symphony Board President and bassoonist Ray Patricio said, quote, "A dedicated director gives us stability and allows one person to work with us in developing and improving our abilities as a band. Having a director allows us to do concerts in other venues and to commission works just for our band. It's a win on many levels, and we're all looking forward to where our new director takes us." Dateline, Baltimore, Maryland. The Marching Ravens, the official band of the National Football League's Baltimore Ravens, have taken delivery of new instruments for their 2024 season, meaning their previous collection will get new homes. The Marching Ravens, the largest musical organization associated with an NFL team, plan to donate their used instruments to local school and community ensembles. The donation will be the first of its kind. Marching Ravens President John Zeman said, quote, "Every arm and angle of the Baltimore Ravens is committed to community outreach, and this is one example of the marching band doing its part. Preserving the arts and sustaining the power of music are incredibly important musicians to each present and past member of our band." An online donation form is now open at the Baltimore Ravens website. The link is included in this episode's show notes. Applicants can select from specific brass instruments, including sousaphones, baritones, mellophones, trumpets, and trombones, and percussion instruments, including bass drums, multi-tenors, and snare drums. The donation form will remain open through August 21st. All of the instruments to be donated were manufactured by the Yamaha Corporation, and they have all been maintained and repaired annually. If you'd like more details about the instruments, visit the link that's included in our show notes. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. After this short pause, a recap of a recent band concert. This is BandWagon. Okay, let's pick it up at the second string. In this week's Second Strain, there was a band concert this past Friday evening in which, but for a tiny schedule conflict, I would have and should have played, in no small part because of the number of people who did play, who are friends of mine from way back, and that would have been tons of fun, never mind the repertoire and the conductor, and I'll get to that. The concert reminded me strongly of a short-term project that I did get into most of 25 years ago that had lots of the same characteristics. In short, that project from 1999 or 2000, I think, was a summer community band that met for a few rehearsals and then played one single concert. It was the Boston College Summer Band under the baton of Bob Ambrose, who has since gone on to be the director of bands at Georgia State University. I'd first encountered Bob when he was at Norwood High School here in Massachusetts, and as part of my graduate music ed degree work, I went to observe him with the Norwood High School Wind Ensemble. They were rehearsing Shostakovich's Galop, a trifle of a piece, and their conductor was a knockout. So of course, when Bob set up this BC Summer Band, I was in. His strategy for that band and its one concert was not to play fluffy movie medleys and light marches, although I did wish we had done some of that since that band was full of really fine players and we'd have slayed. But Bob was interested in programming some decidedly meaty works. I don't at this moment remember specifically what was on the program, but if you went to the concert expecting highlights from Camelot, you didn't get it. And sadly, it was a one and done. The Boston College Summer Band never met again, at least not in that format. This concert from this past Friday night was, in some respects, a similar deal. It was an ensemble called the Acadia Wind Ensemble. For the past 13 years, it's consisted of music educators from all over the state of Maine, as well as a few folks from south of the border in Massachusetts, who would be my gateway into the project. The group meets once a year in midsummer. They rehearse for one night, and the next night they present a 2-hour concert of decidedly not fluffy material. The Acadia Wind Ensemble was co-founded by veteran Maine music educator Andrew Forster and Maine music educator Jen Fortin. UMass Amherst folks will remember her as Jen Cole. And for the last 11 of its 13 years, the band has been conducted by some fellow whose name you might recognize, Anthony Maiello. Yeah, Tony Maiello, who, among other resume stuffer items, has conducted the American Wind Symphony, was honorary conductor of the U.S. Navy Band, conducted the National Symphony Orchestra, in 1980 conducted musical activities for the gold medal ceremonies at the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York. He served as president of the International Association of Jazz Educators, and in 2010 he was inducted into the Bands of America Hall of Fame. So, serious business. I've been part of one band that Tony Maiello conducted some years back at the New Hampshire Band Directors Institute, and for somebody with a towering resume like his, he turned out to be one of the most down-to-earth, affable, kind people you could ever hope to meet. So, although I couldn't get to the rehearsal this past Thursday night, I did fire up the live stream this past Friday night, and I'll just leave the link to that video in the show notes of this episode. You will want to check it out, I think. Quality stuff, whether you take into account the compressed rehearsal schedule or not. The concert began with John Williams' Olympic fanfare and theme, and kind of didn't slow down from there. There was Robert Sheldon's With Every Sunrise. There was Frank Ticheli's Angels in the Architecture. There was Malcolm Arnold's Four Scottish Dances. They finished up with Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever, and there were a number of other selections before that were, again, not insubstantial. The program would stretch any ensemble, never mind one that only gathered about 24 hours before actually gigging. It was a heck of a thing. And significantly, it was Tony Maiello's final concert as conductor of the Acadia Wind Ensemble. Again, I really encourage you to follow the link to the concert video, or go to YouTube and search for Acadia Wind Ensemble 2024. I think you will not regret spending a couple of hours with it. I'll be right back with DAMON GRANT. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, in answer to a particular listener's question, okay, here's the conclusion of my conversation with percussionist Damon Grant. Phew. I believe we left off somewhere in the vicinity of Damon joining a pop band called the Bomb Squad, or you can go back to episode 22 and refresh your memory that way. In any case, Damon's a working percussionist with roots in southwestern Connecticut, Amherst, Massachusetts, and the world of drum corps. Here we go.
When we were doing the Bomb Squad stuff, Bomb Squad played at the Iron Horse in Northampton, and then we had a day off. And that next day off, Glenn and I, the percussionist and drum set player, were doing a day of percussion masterclass at UMass for Tom Hannum. Tom is like my second dad. Like, I still, to this day, he still looks out for me, and we still check in, and he's still giving me advice and stuff. The amount of admiration and gratitude I have for him is immense. So now I fast forward, Bomb Squad, I'm out of school, Bomb Squad does this thing, and then the Bomb Squad ended up breaking up. That's a story for another podcast, but that actually was really good, because if I was still in that band, I don't know that I would have explored all the other stuff that I'm into now. So it gave me the opportunity to be like, all right, well, I have to make a living. You know, I have loans that I need to pay off. I'm out of school. I now have no gig. I need to pay rent. That was huge in me figuring out like the next steps. So that's, I guess, the short version. No, I guess the long version of what my life has been so far. But
well, selfishly, since this is a Wind Band podcast, and since as this podcast drops, this week is DCI Finals week, I don't want to get too much further without circling back to the Tom Hannum part of your story. A lot of my listeners either know Tom or know of him thanks to the UMass Bands or the DCI Hall of Fame.
Tom is great, not just because of how smart he is, his analyzation of situations so that he can provide you with the most informed information that you may need at the time. So like one of the things, like I was very disorganized, and he made me come to his office and he made me get a calendar. He was like, you're going to go down to the campus center. You're going to get a calendar, one where you can see the whole month, and you're going to bring it back here. And then he sat me down and he pulled out the schedule card that they give you at Amherst, which is like a little 3x5 card. And he's like, you're going to transfer that onto the calendar. And then he's like, now you can see what time you have available to you for practicing, for eating, for other things. And you can see when things are coming up. So it's not like a weekly calendar where you turn the page and you're like, oops, I forgot. You have the whole month, you know? So I've been using this calendar. Like I still have all of the old calendars. They're in a box somewhere behind me. And this started in like 97. I have the calendar all the way up until this year. And I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I was here at this point. And you know, there's things that I've forgotten, but it's in the calendar.
It goes without saying that I was never in the drum line. I was near it when I marched, and then when I got to be working in whatever capacities with the band after that, and then just as an alum, just kind of hanging around and enjoying going to rehearsals and just seeing what was going on. I spent a real long time getting the idea that Tom wasn't just teaching sticking. He wasn't just teaching how you get from here to there. He wasn't just teaching the nuts and bolts of the music, that there was stuff that, whether anybody was focused on it or not, you were going to take with you and apply in the next phase of your life, whatever it was, whether it was musical or otherwise. I suspect that you can speak to this as well. If somebody asks me to point out the people in my professional life that gave me opportunities, that saw some glimmer of this could be something in this kid, I have to point to Tom. First, it's the hoop band. Then he looks at me at one point and says, you know, we got to get you writing for the field. And I said, okay, I accept your terms. I just have to point to Tom and give him all kinds of credit for that.
So jumping on that for a second, there was one of the things I wrote down in my notes here. It was like how band helped me. One of the things is, like you mentioned in my bio, like that I just played on American Idol in the house band. I also played on The Voice in the house band for both of those shows. I would say the Voice one was easier because it was the Voice finale. So there was a lot of moving parts. I only had to play one song. It was a lot of waiting around. I only had to play one song, but in the 48 hours that I was there, I played that one song a total of 5 times because there was a lot of things. That was, a different experience because it was like in and out, lots of waiting around, hurry up and wait. which I did learn from drum corps. With the American Idol thing, the current musical director for the American Idol house band is someone that I crossed paths with in drum corps, but didn't know it. His name's Chris Pooley, and he was in the pit for the Crossmen the same year that I was in the pit for the cadets, when we were both rehearsing at the same university for Move-In, but we like didn't realize that we had crossed paths. But Jason Enott, also goes by JJ, who teaches the Boston Crusaders pit, he knew him from Michigan. They're both from Michigan. They went to school together. So Chris, when he called me to play with what's called Hollywood Week, this is when all the people that go to audition for American Idol, they get their golden ticket and they're like, you're going to Hollywood. So now they had like 100 and something people, 120 people or however many, and they had to whittle it down. And he gave me the heads up. He's like, yeah, eventually it's going to end up being somewhere between 60 and 80 contestants for Hollywood Week. The final number ended up being, I think, 58. But that meant we had to learn essentially 58 tunes in about a day. This one, he told me ahead of time, he's like, this is going to be like a drum corps rehearsal. Mentally, you'll be fried. Physically, you'll be okay. But this is going to be one of the hardest things you do in the pop world. And if you can get through this, you're going to be fine in any other situation, I promise you. Because he's a musical director for people like Pink and Gwen Stefani and Katy Perry. So like he's done all these things like at the highest level in the pop world. And if he's telling me, yeah, I had to rely on my drum corps skills to be able to get through these things with Katy Perry, then I'm like, okay, I trust him. So he was like, I know you're going to be fine because you did drum corps. So you're going to be fine. And it literally was like a drum corps rehearsal. We would rehearse for long hours, a lot of mental fatigue. Physically, I was fine. But yeah, it just moved really fast. Things moved extremely fast. And you had to be mentally sharp and stay in there to be able to digest the information and then react to it. And one of the things that Tom would always say is give people enough time to react to the information given, which Chris was great at. And I was able to be prepared ahead of time. My whole goal was I didn't want to come. I was the new guy in the ensemble. And I was like, I don't want to come in and hold up this operation. I want to be it sneaking in seamlessly and then being like, oh, yeah, that was great. You know, like, I don't want them to turn around and be like, oh, this guy, you know. So that was like one scenario where marching band helped. The other one was because of Tom Hannum, the cadets drumline. Let me back up. In 2012, Madonna got selected for the halftime show for the Super Bowl. The cadets drumline ended up getting hired to do pre-recorded music for it. Okay. I don't know if people know, but this started with Dick Clark. There was like a glitch on the Grammys in, I want to say, the 80s with like live sound. Yeah. So Dick Clark, who had the competing show, the American Music Awards, he was like, that's never going to happen on my show. So he used a lot of pre-recorded tracks on the American Music Awards. And then that became the norm for like high profile events to use some, if not all, pre-recorded tracks. Super Bowl, the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, the tree lighting in Rockefeller Center, some firework events, 4th of July. It depends on the event, how big it is, and how much needs to be controlled. Yeah. Because in the case of the Super Bowl, I think they have like 11 minutes to clear the field, put a stage together, lights, tech, props, band, 9-minute show, tear it all down, redo the football field, game starts again. The odds of somebody being like, oh, I forgot to plug this in, like is huge. So the cadets were one of the drum lines that would get hired to do a lot of these things. I know Riverside Community College does a lot of recorded stuff. There was a show called TRL, Total Request Live, with Carson Daly. And Destiny's Child came out and they did a whole thing live in the studio, and the cadets drumline got to play the entrance music for that. It's on YouTube if anyone wants to see it. I was not there for that. Zach Schlicker, I remember he was there. I was home violently ill, throwing up in a bucket. And I was like, man, I wish I could be there with you guys. And he's like, I just taught Michelle or Beyonce how to play paradiddles. I was like, awesome.
Thanks a bunch.
I hate you. So anyway, the cadets were doing they got hired to do the pre-recorded music, right? We're in there talking to the musical director before we even record anything. The musical director introduces himself and he goes, hi, I'm Kevin Antunes. And I was like, wait a minute. Antunes, I know somebody who has the last name Antunes. And he's like, who do you know? And I was like, his name is Pete Antunes. and I marched with him in the cadets drum corps. And he goes, "Man, Pete's my cousin." I was like, "What?" But instantly there was like a bond. I later talked to Pete, and apparently Madonna had liked drumline, marching drumline stuff. And she asked Kevin, her musical director, how do I put a drumline together? What's available to me? So Kevin called Pete, and Pete kind of walked him through the different styles of drumline. He's like, there's like the Northeast military style that you might see in the cadets. There's like the jazz style you might see with the Crossmen, the Blue Devils. There's the HBCU drumline in the South where they're more dancing. He was the Swiss drum lines overseas. He was going through the Top Secret guy. He was going through all of them. Madonna ended up liking the style of the cadets, the military style. That's why they got called. And I remember George Hopkins put on his Facebook page, I have a recording session for a drumline on this date. If you're available, let me know. There was no like
explanation at all.
Yeah, so I wrote, yo, I'm I mean, this is not, I suggest nobody doing this in a professional email, but I was like, yo, I'm free that day. Holla at your boy. And he was like, I'll keep you posted. Thanks for the info. And then next thing you know, he's like, all right, before we go any further, we are going to use you, but you need to sign this NDA. I was like, okay, yeah, I had no idea what it was. Sign the NDA, and then they started to involve more details. Now we finished the recording, and I didn't know how it was going to get used in the Super Bowl thing. Like I was one of the quote unquote instructors that was there to oversee and help be a liaison between the pop world and the marching world. I get an email from Kevin. Madonna's getting ready to go on tour. We're wondering if you could come in and help her out and get ready. And I wrote back, I don't know if you wrote this to the right person, but I don't know what I could tell Madonna to get ready for a tour. She seems like she's been doing this a while. She knows what she's doing. I don't know what I'm going to tell her. He's like, no. We have a part of the show which is going to involve a marching drum line, and we need somebody to come in and help get the people ready to do that. So I came in, and they had a bunch of dancers, and they wanted some of the dancers to be able to play drumline parts. We set up a table just like, beginning days of like band camp or drum corps. It's like a folding table with a bunch of practice pads and sticks around the table. And I'm going around the table. I'm like, all right, you guys are all dancers. You understand rhythm. How many people have ever played any drums before? Not one hand went up. It's like, great. This is where your thumb and your first finger go. This is called the fulcrum. We went through this. All right, now let's make the letter A, beads down, tips together.
It's a percussion tech class.
Yeah. And then it was like, all right, this is going to be called exercise 1, and it's going to be single strokes. And we're going to do 8 notes on our right hand, and then we're going to stop. And then we went through, we did 8 on a hand. We did a very simple double exercise, which was 4 singles and 4 doubles. So, and I taught them with animal names. Shout out to Cassandra Eaton, who taught me these when I was a kid. So like quarter notes were cat, 8th notes were monkey. I think Tom Ungst has a similar pattern to this too, with that he teaches his young kids. But like quarter notes were cat, 8th notes were monkey, 2/16 and an 8th were billy goat, an 8th and 2/16 is anteater, 4/16 is alligator. And because it's something different, triplets are hickory dickory.
I remember that from the master class.
So we did a very basic 4 cats and 4 monkeys. So it was like right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. That was the doubles exercise. And then we did a triple exercise, which was just 4 billy goats on each hand. And then I went upstairs to talk to Kevin, and I was like, hey man, these guys have no drum training whatsoever. And he's like, okay, so how long is this going to take? Initially, I was supposed to be there for 3 to 5 days. He's like 3 to 5. And I was like, years. These guys cannot play drums at all. He's like, well, we don't have that long, so we need to figure something out. What we ended up doing was the dancers were able to pull off some very simple check patterns. And I called Tom Hannum, and I was like, thank you for check patterns. I was like, I'm in rehearsal right now, and I would not be able to get anywhere through what we needed to do if it wasn't for the check patterns, the simplicity of explaining them, the excellence that it provides in understanding rhythm. If you watch her MDNA tour, when we get to the middle of the show, it was like a whole section where it was express yourself. So there's a whole marching percussion section. And the 2 choreographers, Rich and Tone Talawega, were actually Michael Jackson's choreographers for a long time. They pulled different aspects from different things. So a lot of the dancing stuff they got from like the Brooklyn Steppers and some other HBCU drum lines. And they're like, what can we actually do with drums on to dance? And so if you watch the middle of that section of the show, that was something that took a very long time to get up to speed. And anyway, check patterns helped pull off part of Madonna's tour.
Probably retroactively or retrospectively inspiring to consider the kinds of things you can pull from your previous experience.
Well, I mean, just in the long days, it was like we were rehearsing all day and all night, and it was broken up into sections like this, chunk. So you had to be able to decompress when you had time off, so you didn't get fried, and then you had to be able to be on for long periods of time. And then when you get to the touring aspect, touring with a drum corps taught me how to travel well, how to be on time, quote unquote, early, how to wear the right uniform, just navigating how to get from place to place efficiently. I can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich better than anybody because I've had to do it so many times. I can drink fluids faster than anyone.
Gush and go.
Yeah, but like even like a lot of these private event situations I'll be in, the food, the catering will be ready at one time and your break is at another time. So it's like, oh, the food is now ready, but you're going to have to go back on in like 3 minutes. Can you eat as much as possible? This is not healthy in any aspect, but I can eat a meal in like 3.5 minutes flat
and survive it.
Yeah, and be ready to play. And that's because of drum corps. I mean, that's how band has helped me in like my current career.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, was allegedly the short version of how Damon Grant got from the Muppet Show drum set to teaching Madonna's drum line. It is a remarkable tour, and I am curious to know, if you have a current day job, what and where?
The first thing is playing live. I told you in the beginning, I'm a side person. So playing live is one of the main sources of my income. Recording for people, whether it's I'm going to their studio or I'm recording from my own studio, that is something that I do a lot. The pandemic has made me get a lot better at it because there was a lot more people stuck at home doing that. But I was doing that before the pandemic. Now I'm just quicker at it and able to produce a better result faster. Teaching master classes. So like I will teach privately. I have some students that I do. Most of them are online virtually, but I don't spend a lot of my time teaching, but I do clinics and master classes. So I've been traveling around to different universities and music stores, whatever, doing clinics and master classes, which has been awesome. And I love helping people. Podcasting. I do host a podcast. I'm in like year 8. It's called Discussions in Percussion. Comes out every Tuesday. And I talk to percussionists from all genres and all styles and percussion educators. And then I just started a percussion ensemble with 3 other friends of mine who are all percussionists, Marcos Torres, Marcos Lopez, and Camilo Molina. But our idea is to make it a percussion collective where we want to feature different percussionists and different works and invite other percussionists, women, other nationalities. So it is a percussion ensemble that we started as for people of color because there aren't a lot of those out there. Like if you look at the Nexuses and the SOs and the Third Coast and the Sandbox, and they're all pretty lacking in the melanin area. So we felt that there was a space that was to be created for that. So that's my active income. Those are the things that I have to physically be up and doing to make money. Then I also have like passive income. So I recorded a loop and one-shot library that I have distributed through Yurt Rock. That's available. So now I recorded that once, and now people can buy that ad nauseum, and I get a royalty statement every quarter. I designed a percussionist survival bag because every time I would go on the road, I needed like a stick bag and a backpack and a couple other things. So I designed it. I'm in talks with a company right now on how to build it and then distribute it. But the actual design and blueprint of it is pretty close to like flushed out. And that took me a while of like having backpacks and being on the road and being like, well, this sucks. And I would love this. And, and buying a bunch of backpacks and being like, okay, I love this one. And this is why. And I hate this one. And this is what, and then with that percussion ensemble that I mentioned, we had the idea to do a docuseries similar to like the Ken Burns thing, based off of the music of the West African diaspora. and how it made its way to the new world through the Middle Passage. And this started because when we were doing the podcast, we were interviewing these people that, were telling these stories where it's like, I've never heard this before. And it's because a lot of those people that have come through the Afro-Cuban music and West African diaspora, it was either passed down orally through the elders, or it wasn't passed down at all because they didn't want to share that information. Now, maybe it's because they're being faced with their own mortality that they're being more willing to share. But we're losing a lot of the masters and the people that have developed this art form. So we were talking to one person, Jose Madera, who was in Tito Puente's band, and he was like, man, he told us something. We're like, we've never heard that before. That is crazy. He's like, yeah, man, you guys should, make a movie about it. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, you already got that podcast, just throw up a camera. We're like, no, there's a whole lot more involved in that. But he was the one that kind of instigated it. And we knew that we needed the percussion ensemble to be the vehicle to kind of start it. So, we have ideas for the docuseries, but we know that that's a long-term project. And then on my own, I spoke at a music conference a few years ago. The seminar was on how to get gigs and how to keep them and also enjoy them while you're doing them. I finished that, and the people that started the conference were like, man, you need to turn this into a book. And I was like, wrong guy. I don't write books. And they're like, they just kept peer pressuring me, just like, have you started yet? Come on, just come on. So it was like a snowy January in New York, and my gig had gotten canceled. That I was like, all right, let me just organize these bullet points. Because people were asking me after I did the seminar, like, can I have the notes?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I mean, just my chicken scratch. They're like, no, but if you go to my website now, on the lessons page, you can actually just download the bullet points from that speaking seminar. But I will tell you that those bullet points have been organized in a better fashion. And I'm currently now writing a book. The book is not only my sentiments, but it's also interviews with people that are at the top of their game in whatever the chapter is I'm talking about. And it's also quotes from prose. And I'm up to like currently 250 pages. It's going really well. And what I started doing was taking points from the book and sneaking them into the clinics and masterclasses I was doing. So even that masterclass you said you watched that I did at the LA College of Music, there's a good chunk of the stuff from the book in that masterclass. So that's what I've been doing now, is as I've been doing these clinics and masterclasses, sneaking in the book stuff so that I'm continuing to write. And I know that it's going to be a good product because I've already tested it out with a couple of musicians that I've sent them rough drafts, and they've just been following the steps in the book. And they're like, this has changed my life. I'm already seeing results. I'm getting more gigs. I've never even thought about this way. This is an eye opener, So my goal, there's a friend of mine, Ari Herstand, who wrote a book called How to Make It in the New Music Business. He's one of the people I interviewed for the book, and his is primarily music business, but we were talking, and there's no real book for what I do. If you're a 1099 subcontracted employee, chances are you went to music school, right? The people that went into music business and the people that went into being an artist or the front person generally don't go to music school, right? The business people go to business school, and the artists just go out and just become an artist, right? So anyone who's getting hired by an artist like me, or anyone in an orchestra or on Broadway or on a late show, TV show, or whatever, probably went to music school. And a lot of times they learn all the chords and the notes and the rhythms, and then they get out of school and they have no gig and they have a lot of debt and they don't know which way to go, and they were not given all of the tools. So my point is to make this book a useful handbook. It's not going to have all the answers, but it's at least going to get people in the right direction and help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I was going. So I'm really excited about the book, and I know that it's been working because I've given it to a couple people as rough drafts, and they've been loving it. And I've been sneaking into my clinics and master classes, and it's been working really well. And people have been, and they're like, nobody's talking about this. And I'm like, why? Like, this is the information that needs to. So the goal of my book is that I get it distributed through a distributor that also distributes to universities and colleges, because I know only certain book distributors are allowed to distribute at a collegiate bookstore. So as I'm winding up the interviews and finishing the draft, I also have a book coach who's going to help me. And that's one of my main goals, is to get it into collegiate bookstores. So people that are in school trying to figure this out have a resource to at least help them.
This is going to seem like a swerve, but I don't think it is, to say that over the course of this conversation, you've dropped an almost intimidating number of names, people you've worked with, role models you've had, but you haven't seemed to me like an intimidating person, and I appreciate that. And also the fact that you want to turn around and go help people who are coming along after you.
It takes a village. Like that's
Yeah.
something I learned. Like, when you see all these like Fortune 500 CEOs talking about, I pulled myself up to my bootstraps. It's like, no, you didn't. Like,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of people that helped you. For example, no shade to this person at all. Some people may know who I'm talking about. There was a person who was playing drums for Prince. They did a drum clinic at PASIC. Towards the end of the clinic, they opened it up for questions. And I'm not even kidding you. This guy stood up with a Southern accent and he raised his hand. He's like, how'd you get the gig with Prince? The person was very gracious. They were like, oh, thank you so much for that question. I appreciate it. It all started with me having the passion, and I took lessons, and I had the support from my dad who helped me get the right education and taking more lessons. And then, we would go to church and I would pray to God. And then Prince called my phone and he asked me to go on tour with him. And I'm like, I threw my hands up in the back of the room, like, are you kidding me? There is a whole bunch of stuff you were leaving out between I took lessons, my dad supported me, I prayed to God, Prince called my phone. Like, and that's when it was like a light switch in me. I was like, I'm not intimidated that somebody's going to steal my gig. If somebody steals my gig because I'm unprepared, then that's on me. Mm-hmm. But you should be able to tell somebody, oh, this, I understand like maybe keeping the money amounts to yourself, but I'm still like not afraid to talk money with people, because if you go to like a corporate job, they're like, this is the salary we're offering, and you can say I can do it for that or not. It's a lot more transparent in that world than it is in the music world or entertainment industry. So yeah, I'm all about giving the information so that people have at least the tools to work with, and then whether or not they choose to do anything with it, that's on them.
And somewhere between my dad supported me a real lot and I offered a lot of prayer, and then I got hired on this major tour, there is a whole lot of, I went and played this crappy little gig that nonetheless somebody saw me, and through happenstance and good fortune and blind luck and the kindness of people, and a whole lot of elements that do include names of people that, if we're fortunate in whatever line of work we get into, we can look back and at the very least point to people and say, they helped.
But the thing is, you never know what connection is going to help you.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Most recently, I ended up doing this show. Like, Broadway is not for me. Like, I learned that when I was doing Blast. I was like, this is fun, but that's not where my heart is, right? So I got a call to do this thing in New York City they call the Encores, where they take a Broadway show from the past and it was ended, and they revive it for 2 weeks as an encore performance. I got a call randomly and it was like, hey, we're doing this show called Jelly's Last Jam in New York City for 2 weeks, and you were recommended as a possible percussionist. Would you be interested? And I said, well, what is? And he said, well, first of all, it's only 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, in my head, I can do Broadway for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Also, the fact that it was a jazz show. It's the music of and the story about Jelly Roll Morton. I was like, okay, cool. I still had no idea. I'd never seen this show. I later found out that the original had like Ben Vereen and Gregory Hines, and it was amazing. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. But at the time, I was like, yeah, 2 weeks, I can do that. It's all hand drums. I didn't have to worry about any mallet percussion or timpani or anything like that. I was like, that makes it even easier. They were also like, and because of the nature of the show, we want the whole cast and the whole orchestra to be Black. And it was being done during Black History Month. I was like, well, that's a really special thing. So I did the show for 2 weeks, and it was a legendary orchestra that I was in, like with legendary musicians, where I'm looking over, I'm like, oh my God, I was reading your name in liner notes. Like the original clarinet player from the show when it came out in the 80s was the guy playing clarinet on the show that I did. The cast, it had like Billy Porter, had Leslie Uggams. I mean, it was like absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, how did I get thrust into this? How did they even find me? What it was Carter McLean from Connecticut, his day job playing on the Lion King, right? He called me and was like, hey man, if you're in town, I'm playing this place, it was a brewery in Ridgefield that had like outdoor concert of the summer. I was like, man, I'm marking it in my calendar. I would love to come see you play. The keyboard player, he was playing with an organ trio. So the B3 organ player, I knew from other New York gigs that we had done. So I was like, oh man, two of the three people I know, I can't wait to go watch this gig. And then Carter goes, why don't you just play on the gig? I was like, no, I don't want to impose. Like, this is your gig. He goes, I know, it's my gig. And I'm telling you, you are welcome to play. Why don't you just bring a couple of congas and maybe a tambourine and play with us? And I was like, okay.
You forced me.
I was like, fine, I'll play it, but don't pay me. He's like, no. So they bought me a sandwich. It's like, come on. I was more than happy to play. So Carter was the drummer, Eric Finland was the keyboard player, and the guitar player was Michael Ahrens, who I had never met. But I met him for the first time on that gig, and it was like, oh, you sound great. Nice to meet you. And then we went our separate ways. Michael Ahrens was the one that recommended me for this Jelly's Last Jam. If I had not done this gig, I would not have this opportunity. And Jelly's Last Jam has gotten me other opportunities just from being in contact with these. You never know what scenario is going to pan out. So you can't go into things with a targeted approach thinking, oh, I'm going to do this because this is going to get me where I need to be. Yeah. A long time ago, somebody told me it was the 3 M's that when you decide to take a gig: music, your mates, and the money. You have to have at least 2 of the 3. The music's good, the money's good, but you don't really know anybody on the gig. Take it. You might meet some new people. Or your friends are on the gig, the music's really fulfilling, but it doesn't pay well. Well, it's okay to take one of those sometimes because you're going to get other things out of it. But, if there's only one of the 3, then there's a 4th M that can come into play, and that's called the milieu. That's a French word for location or setting. So like maybe the money's just okay. You only know a couple people on the gig. The music's decent, but you're in St. Bart's for the whole winter. You're like, okay, well, I'm taking the gig. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's why like I've weighed taking gigs. Like now I'm at the point where like I can actually say no because I've set up passive income. But, now I can like evaluate. I don't have to say yes to everything. There was a point where it was like, I'm doing this and I don't care. And then you get like those war stories with friends. Be like, remember that time we did? They're like, oh my God. Yeah. So, there was a point where I did that. But now I'm at a point in my career where I can choose what I want to do and what I don't want to do because I've taken the time and the energy to set up the other stuff.
As long as we're talking about active and passive incomes and setups and connections, is there somewhere online where people can find you to find out more about you and maybe even to throw some business your way?
Yeah. So my website is just my name, Damon Grant, 10 letters, 1 for each finger, .org. It used to be .com. A long time ago, I had a bad webmaster who wasn't paying attention to it, and it ended up becoming a porn site. But then it has been relinquished and it's now available, but it's $1,200. So until I have $1,200 extra dollars laying around, you can find me at damongrant.org. And one day I'll also buy .com, unless anyone out there listening wants to buy .com for me, and then I can just redirect it so it all goes to the same place. But damongrant.org. Every single social media platform I'm not on TikTok, is the same handle, at Damon M, as in my middle name, which is Michael Grant. So at Damon M Grant on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
On the website, there is a contact us sort of page, which is where you can go if you got $1,200 lying around.
yeah, please let me know. The website is also a place where you can get all the information on me, what I'm doing, all the public stuff. And also it's a place where people reach out if they want me to record for them. There's a form on the recording page that you can just fill out. We don't even have to meet in person, and I can record for you from the comfort of my own home. That's been a huge thing, adding that page so that people can just go right there and be like, this is what I need.
Percussion performer, educator, podcaster, Damon Grant. Thanks so much for talking with me today. And again, it's great to meet you and great to hear all the stories.
Yeah, I look forward to meet you in person one day, either at UMass or somewhere else in the world. But if we meet at UMass, we're going to the hangar, right?
I even know where that is. It's moved around.
It's across the street from where it used to be.
Yeah. Okay, after this brief fermata, we'll head for the big finish. Thanks so much for staying with me. Here comes the dogfight. This week's dogfight is a follow-up to last week's Drum Major Academy blowout. During my two-part interview session with Damon Grant, he's dropped a lot of names of people with whom he's performed, but also of people who have made a difference in his life, professionally and personally. And it reminded me of two very different stories about those two kinds of name-droppable people, about brushes with fame, which I shall now regale you with, if you'll pardon the indulgence. It was at probably my second summer with DMA, late July 2000, I think, and the location was Westchester University. DMA was part of a larger 4-day event, the marching band conference put on by Vivace Productions, which was a company run by the Westchester band director John Villella. The conference included student clinics, DMA for the high school drum majors, but also a color guard track, a twirler track, a marching percussion track led in part by the aforementioned Tom Hannum, and a brass and woodwind track, which was led in later years by the musical arranger Jay Bocook, which is a name that just about every school band member since the early 1980s will recognize from the top right-hand corner of your sheet music. And as the students were doing their thing, a lot of the local Pennsylvania high school band directors who sent those kids to the conference were taking part in their own set of professional development workshops. On one of the evenings of the conference week, there was what was called the director's party. While the kids were being taken care of by the university dorm staff, all the directors were joined in a nearby hotel function room by the clinicians for a bit of socializing, a bit of adult beveraging, and a couple of staged moments. So in that 2000 conference week, that director's party had been going on for half an hour or so when I arrived at the function room with several of my DMA staff colleagues, and two things happened that have stuck with me. The first thing was, almost immediately on our arrival, we crossed paths with some conference clinicians. I greeted and briefly chatted with the eventual DCI Hall of Fame inductees Michael Klesch, whom I'd known as the graduate assistant at UMass during my junior and senior years there, and Tom Hannum, who was also UMass's assistant band director. And shortly after those quick chats, I walked past George Parks and he said, "Hi, Rob." And he noted that we'd cleaned up pretty nice after a day in the 90-plus degree heat working with the DMA students. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a lot of the high school directors sitting at tables nearby, staring at us wide-eyed, some of them tapping others on the shoulders and pointing in our direction as if to say, "That's Tom Hannum. That's George Parks." And meanwhile, I'm just shooting the breeze with these Hall of Famers as if I'd known them for ages, which I guess I had comparatively. I never took for granted the idea that I knew these people well enough to just say, "Hi, Mike. Hey, Tom. Hi, George." Anyway, the other thing that happened was a little bit less, shall we say, deep, but it gave me an idea of what kind of corner of the band world I'd been dragged into, willingly. Some other DMA staff members had already arrived at the director's party, and the rest of us joined them at one of the big round banquet tables set up in the function room. I sat down with about 15 other people who were sitting at a table designed for 10, looked around briefly, and realized that 3 seats to my right was a fella I recognized from the TV, specifically from the DCI Finals broadcast that at the time was heavily edited for time and shown on public television during Thanksgiving weekend. His name was Michael Cesario. Now, if you're not familiar with the name, he was originally a theater guy who became, among many other drum corps roles, the color commentator for a lot of those 1980s and 1990s DCI broadcasts. He was, shall we say, effervescent in his commentary there, and in fact anywhere he went. The best analogy I can come up with was that he was the Nathan Lane of drum corps. Brilliant, opinionated, colorful, a gigantic personality. Here's a sample of how he approached even the most mundane of tasks, helping DCI announcer Steve Rondinero to hawk one of the DCI historical DVD releases.
We had the 3 Midwestern powerhouses take 1, 2, and 3. Star of Indiana winning. Great show. Roman images, music of Respighi mostly.
You know what I remembered from that show was some of the fantastic horn work that runs in the mellophone section.
Jim Prime, the composer and arranger of the horns. He's a miracle man, but he is so intricate. And when you go back to listen to these, as we will in the DVDs, listen to some of the inner voicings. He's the master of that. Mm-hmm. Tom Hannum doing the percussion, and he uses textures and timbres we just haven't heard anywhere in percussion before. And of course, the great George Zingali does the drill. There's a moment near the end where they make this huge cross. Suddenly it blows up, it disintegrates, and appears magically on the other side of the field. The place goes crazy. Mm-hmm. Really a remarkable show from a remarkable corps.
So that's kind of a damped down version of what that guy's like. And did I mention, I don't think I did, that Cesario was also mischievous? I didn't know it when I first sat down at that table, but I found out. One of the staged events of the director's party was the awarding of door prizes. Little trinkets and souvenirs and other items were given away to lucky band directors. So, as master of ceremonies, John Villello stood up, grabbed a microphone, and described the various door prize items, then plucked tickets out of a punch bowl, and whichever band director held the matching tickets won the prizes. And Michael Cesario turned our table of DMA staffers into a snarky, unauthorized Greek chorus, commenting on each door prize as John Villello was reaching for the next ticket to pull. When John showed everyone an official Vivace Productions polo shirt, the table murmured, "Ooh, ah, fashion." When he showed an official Vivace Productions keyring, the table murmured, "Ooh, ah, shiny." And when he described how the next ticket would win full tuition to next year's conference for a director and their students, the table murmured, "Ooh, ah, money." The longer that went on, the more the band directors chuckled at it, and the more irritated Dr. Villella got. And loath as I am to be part of a disruptive activity, hey, it was being led by Michael Cesario. We were his official helpers. That made it okay, right? Right? I didn't even mind that I didn't get to talk to him one-on-one that evening. Of all the brush with fame stories in the world, safe to say, I don't think anybody other than that DMA staff had a story quite like that. More stories in the future as they occur to me, and maybe they might have a little more to do with the actual band activity. Maybe that might be a good idea. But for now, let's take a short break, and then on the other side of that, a little bit of correspondence. To finish up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, I got another letter, email, whatever. This one is from Rachel, with whom I discover I have a 1 degree of separation connection to the Boston University bands. She's also active in her local school music booster organization, which is doggedly supporting the performing arts, even if the tax override vote in her community should fail. And you can go back to episode 17 to hear me hold forth about that particular annual face-off between the bean counters and the humanities. Ahem. She writes, I decided to start from the beginning of your episodes, and I've just finished Band Rising. I want to reach out to thank you for aiming to reach a broad audience of band folks. I'm not an educator, didn't play in a college marching band, and just started in my community band in January. The math may not be obvious, but I'm knocking off 30 years of rust to do so. It has been helpful to me to hear your community band discussions acknowledge the varied levels of players present in community bands and reinforce that not only is that okay, but it's welcome. It helps me remind myself that even when I don't manage to completely execute that tricky phrase by the time of the performance, despite all the extra practice, I still belong. And thanks to our community band, all 4 members of our family performed together for the first time this summer. Me on clarinet, hubby on tuba, 17-year-old son on tuba, and 20-year-old daughter on trumpet. You can't beat that. So, thanks for including this rusty player as a member of the community and not assuming we listeners have a deep background of knowledge of all things band. Regards, Rachel. And Rachel has pretty much summed up the intent of this whole podcast project. As a wise person once said, band is a place for everyone. It's a place for everyone at every stage of life, at every level of ability. It's why I try to talk about marching band and seated bands, school bands and community bands, as many different variations and topics and subtopics of the activity as I can. And if you don't think I talk about your particular area of interest enough, maybe I should have you on and you can get me to talk about it. I'm game. And I'm thankful that people seem to think I'm basically on the right track here. Let's then spread the word. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like, what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest DAMON GRANT can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton. Postscript.